Over to my colleague Akisa Wandera. She is on the other side of the studio and she's going to be having a conversation around Trump's inauguration and just what lays ahead as he, of course, takes over office. Akisa, over to you.
All right, thank you very much, Betty. And we continue with our conversation on the change of guard in the United States of America. Donald John Trump is officially the 45th president of the United States of America. He made an 18-minute speech that people continue to try and dissect on the social media and beyond. And here we are continuing with that conversation. And joining me in studio is Awiti, a policy and governance expert, as well as Professor Macharia Munene, who is a historian and an international relations lecturer. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for coming in. I would not start this conversation without asking about your thoughts on the speech made by Donald Trump about an hour ago. I'll start with you, Professor.
Well, it was, as you say, a short speech. It was a good speech. Maybe not the most exciting in terms of oratory, but it was very well crafted to create the impression that something new is coming. He's calling what? A new dawn, which implies that the last few decades have been darkness, you know, and that has been his running theme, that he's kind of a new force. He models himself very much after Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan, a lot of people had dismissed him as a nobody, that he could not be elected. And he just kept and swept. And you see a similarity with Donald Trump. The difference is that Ronald Reagan was a good orator. You know, that one is given. And, but he addressed his followers. Forget about his critics. He was not interested in his critics. So he was addressing his followers, and there were many of them there cheering.
All right.
Okay? So it was a good speech in as much as he was addressing his followers and anyone else who stands in between trying to figure out what he's up to. But he was very clear about what he wanted.
All right. Alice, what do you think?
Well, I will reserve my choicest words to describe Donald Trump's speech. But I think I'm personally disappointed because I thought that Trump would sort of rise to the occasion and kind of play in the league table of some of the most inspiring American presidents on the inaugural day. He had promised a philosophical speech. He said he was writing it himself. But I didn't see any deep thought. And it's not surprising for a man who has extreme disdain for precise language. Trump is not a man of ideas. Trump is a very ordinary human being who has made fame out of just running buildings. So I don't think that we would expect anything deeply intellectual from his conversation. But in many ways, it sounded like some of his victory lap speeches after the election. Yeah. He had promised that he wouldn't do that. But I think he's set himself up for a lot of stuff, and it will be interesting to see to what extent he delivers. He wants to return government to the people. But I think going back to Prof's comments, I think the speech was not a unity speech in many ways. It played back to the base. It was handing the people back the pork. I didn't see him rising up and binding the wounds, as he had said in his acceptance speech. So I think Trump is all over the map, and it'll be interesting to see how his presidency is shaped by the people who surround him. But I think right now, from many watching across the globe and Americans, I think people are pausing and wondering what's going to happen. At this point, we can only speculate, but as Prof says, let's see what happens.
All right, all right. Let's just take a look at what exactly Donald Trump said about foreign policy and the relationship between the U.S. and other countries, and we'll definitely be coming back to this conversation. Take a look.
For many decades, we've enriched foreign industry at the expense of American industry, subsidized the armies of other countries while allowing for the very sad depletion of our military. We've defended other nations' borders while refusing to defend our own. And spent trillions and trillions of dollars overseas, while America's infrastructure has fallen into disrepair and decay. We've made other countries rich, while the wealth, strength, and confidence of our country has dissipated over the horizon. One by one, the factories shuttered and left our shores, with not even a thought about the millions and millions of American workers that were left behind. The wealth of our middle class has been ripped from their homes and then redistributed all across the world. But that is the past, and now we are looking only to the future.
All right, that's a John Trump's sentiments about foreign policy. And currently what we're showing you, just before we get back to the discussion, he is currently arriving at the congressional luncheon, which is a tradition that has been observed for many years once a president has been sworn in. So President Donald Trump has arrived at the congressional luncheon together with First Lady Melania Trump. But let's get back to our discussion. Professor, you are an international relations lecturer at a recognized university here in the country. From what Donald Trump says, he looks like he's looking within America. He seems not to care about the rest of the world. So should the rest of the world be worried?
No, but it should also reassess itself. You know, what President Trump is doing or saying he's going to do is very natural. But when you come into a new situation with a different agenda, you first of all reorganize yourself. So he says he's going to reorganize American thrust and outward look. So instead of looking outward too much, he's going to be inward looking. So some kind of isolationism is going to take, which fits in with some of the trends in Europe. The Brexit thing is, this is the trend of, and what you have is some people in the West are concerned that they have been losing influence. And they think they have been losing influence because they have not looked too deeply inside themselves. So in a way, the speech he gave is a campaign speech for 2020. You know, in a way.
Already?
Yes, because he means to win, he means to be re-elected. And that, if you listen to that speech, it's a 2020 speech rather than a 2017 speech. So he's saying looking inward for American interests as he perceives it. It is in the interest of Kenya and other countries in the world to also re-examine their position vis-a-vis Donald Trump. It will be awkward to sit there mourning and crying this. No. He's doing the right thing. Now it's for the other countries to also do the right thing and see how they synchronize, where they converge. The convergence points is very good. If there is divergence, you say, okay, you go your way, we go our way. But there should be none of that mourning, begging sort of thing.
So when you talk about reassessment,
yes,
as Kenyans, what should we do?
As Kenya, well, I hope the president and his team will closely examine not only Donald Trump, but the people around him, and what it is they think. And some of them are very bright. Some people make a mistake. Donald Trump is not dumb. That's why he won, because he's not dumb. So you also need to examine these people. Who is it that is advising them? Who is it that is going to be driving the policies? And then once you examine those things, what are they saying? And how is that fitting into Kenya's interest? We assume that the people who are running the country, Kenya, know what Kenya's interests are. And they will not be confused with American interests. Sometimes we get some people promoting American interests instead of Kenyan interests or British interests. No. It's a re-examination from inside and then project not just to the United States, but also to other countries like Britain, Germany, China, Russia, India, Tanzania. So Kenya first. And there was nothing wrong with Donald Trump saying America first. It's normal.
Dr. Awiti, do you agree that it's certainly going to be a new dawn when it comes to foreign policy of the United States?
Well, I think many of Trump's colleagues in the Republican Party during the nomination process said Trump's foreign policy was all over the map. I think Trump said that he's going to stop ISIS dead in their tracks. He's going to fix Syria. He's going to fix the Middle East peace. He's going to scrap the Iran nuclear deal. He's going to scrap the climate change agreement, the Paris agreement. So Trump is sending a lot of mixed signals. But I think what is consistent is Trump's frustration with the trajectory of neoliberal democracies and the rise of globalization and what that has meant to the United States so-called Rust Belt, the whole Appalachia, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. There's been tremendous decline there, but I think a lot of that is explainable given that most of those jobs were exported to China and to Mexico. I think because of the economics of making things and that America was moving up the food chain. But I think what happened is you have this revolt of white Americans, especially white male, who were basically coal miners, guys who were doing the blue-collar jobs. So I think, well, he rightly mentioned education. I would like to see what he's going to do to retool Americans, give them the skills for the 21st century. But to imagine that we'll go back and dig coal in the Rust Belt and to begin doing all these other things that can be done more efficiently by other countries is going to be difficult. I think raising the cost of doing business in the United States is inevitable because they cannot compete China or Mexico, especially given Americans' minimum wage. So it's going to be interesting. And I think Trump must understand that the United States is a small country in the grand scheme of the economic blocs such as the EU, China, India, and even Africa. America is just comprised of 300 million people. And I think if you look at the rise of the global middle class, America is not going to be the place that consumes at the highest per capita. And I think these dynamics are problematic. And Trump must just be serious as a president to grapple honestly with these things and stop sloganeering because it's going to run against these very, very significant headwinds of reality.
All right. Professor, there was a lot of hope when President Barack Obama became the 44th president that finally we have a black president. So that means more gains for Africans, specifically Kenyans. But it didn't really come to pass because probably we were too ambitious. But comparing the Obama legacy, especially with the relationship he had with Africa, Kenya specifically, how is Donald Trump going to continue this, or is it going to be a major shutdown for us?
No, it will not be a major shutdown. It is in America's interest to relate to other countries, irrespective of how low the level. There are some things that he's going to continue with. He has made it clear that there are things he's going to just ignore. And one thing I think he even said in this speech, aid may be cut, and there's nothing wrong with cutting aid, because aid is like AIDS, it kills. So they get rid of that thing. The projection of Trump on building America as opposed to building other countries is something he has emphasized through and through, and it resonates very well with a lot of voters who voted for him, a lot of them. So that one is not, for Kenyans and other people, they should not be worried about that. Because the stress here is to find a linkage where the Americans, and they are business-minded, can also invest here. And there is more value in getting investments here than being given aid or that kind of thing. So I'm not seeing a major problem here. Now, Barack Obama, when he was elected, not just when he was elected, when he was running, we were very excited. He was an inspiration, and even out of office, he continued to be an inspiration. All right. That it can be done. As to the relations with Africa, I don't think it was that big. Other than being an inspiration, it was not something to talk about. He himself did say that if Hillary is not elected, it will be kind of a rejection of his legacy. That is a problem with him. He was a messianic figure, but not delivering very much on the ground. Yeah.
Dr. Awiti, going forward, what do we expect from a Trump presidency? And let's just look at ourselves as a continent. We talked about reassessing and reorganizing ourselves. Going forward, what should we be seeing even from governments in the continent?
Well, it'll be interesting to see the first African presidents that pay a visit to Trump, or Trump's first foreign visit. But I think, as Prof said, Africa needs to start taking itself seriously. I think, aid is one of those divisive topics. So there's elements of aid that can be good, especially if it's advancing immunization and promoting maternal and child health. If it is putting books and teachers in front of kids. There is aid that can be beneficial, but I think governments need to start investing public resources and taxpayers' money and managing our own resources more judiciously. But I think one thing is clear. Trump's transitional administration asked several interesting questions. One, about the efficacy of America's prosecution of the war on terror. They asked questions about PEPFAR, which is a presidential fund for AIDS relief that was started by President Bush. They asked questions about things like Boko Haram, for instance. So I think it is in that process of just basically trying to untangle this and to understand. And I think that process is inevitable, that any administration would come in and try to understand the lay of the land. Why is money going here? Why is money going there? He said that they've been building militaries across the world, except in their own country. They have not protected their borders. So all of these things, we'll try and see how this administration unfolds. And 4 years is not a long time, and we'll see how that pans out in the days to come.
All right, thank you. Way to finish this. African governments need to look at themselves from within. And before I let you go, I think, Professor, we would also love to hear your last comments on a Trump presidency and what measures African governments should put in place so that they're not caught flat-footed by the very tough-speaking
Well,
Donald
they should
Trump.
not expect anything new from Trump, other than what has been going on before. You see, the difference with Barack Obama is like President Woodrow Wilson, messianic, and that's the legacy that you will be left. Inspirational, messianic. With Donald Trump, expect anything and be ready for it.
Be ready for anything.
Be ready for anything, and therefore you should not be surprised when it happens.
Well, quite the unpredictable president we have of a superpower country. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for coming in. Dr.
Thanks.
Alex Awiti is a public policy and governance expert. Professor Macharia Munene, historian and international relations lecturer. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for coming in. Let's continue with this conversation about the Trump presidency, some of the things that we expect as Africans and as Kenya, and we can always continue that conversation on the social media. Hashtag is Friday Briefing, so I would expect to see a number of your tweets on what you think about the Trump presidency, as there have been an official change of guard at the United States of America. My name is Akisa Wandera. I hand you back over to Betty Kialo.